Hi, my name is Aaron James. This is my final presentation for the final PowerPoint project in marriage and family communication. My topic is very broad, but I chose to talk about healthy communication in marriage. I do know this is kind of part of all of the course, right? But at the same time, it is something that not only I feel like we did talk about and can be specifically applied to marriage and healthy communication in marriage, but is something that I hold very dear to my heart in my marriage. And I've seen that the more that I'm able to focus on having healthy communication and focus on having those boundaries and understanding of one another, the more healthy that my marriage has been. So to introduce it, I would argue that one of the most important topics of marriage is communication. I just mentioned that a little bit personally on my end. And I would also say that communication in general and having healthy communication is going to be one of your most important topics just in relationships, whether that is marriage or work relationships, friendships, dating relationships. That being able to have healthy communication and learn how to communicate healthily in those relationships, I believe is one of the most important tools and topics that you can work on in a relationship setting. I would ask a question, that would be geared towards, if you could look on your relationship now, like how, is your communication in your relationship, right? Are you and your spouse aligned in marriage, or are you constantly disagreeing or leading to frustration and bitterness, which I would believe could be a result of miscommunication and not having a healthy approach or a healthy basis for communication. And I believe that a lot of a lot of fights in relationships is because of unhealthy communication, and that can be easily resolved in working through some tools that I would like to mention. A few of the areas that I would like to go through in this PowerPoint are going to be looking at active listening, the idea that the two parties in the relationship are on the same team, and I'll go further into that, but then also having intentional check-ins. These aren't the only points that can be mentioned, but for me, and going through our course and looking at communication in relationship settings and some of the tools that I've learned in this class, and then also that I've walked through, I think these are some of the more important ones that I've experienced. The first main point is active listening. This was a big one and some tools that I had learned in the class. But that active listening, I believe, has to be the first step. If you're in a conversation or a fight and you're just listening to argue and not to understand your spouse or your significant other, then you're listening for you're not listening for the right reasons. You're listening for the wrong reasons, and it's going to, in my opinion, set you up for failure, right? So instead of understanding or being able to understand what the other person is coming from, you're not actually listening to that. You're just trying to come up with these ideas or refutes about how you can protect yourself, and then it's harming that communication and creating a unhealthy balance of communication and creating an unhealthy relationship. I'd say that active listening allows you to slow down and hear the concerns and needs of the fellow person. According to Sandstone Psychology, they say that active listening and the practice of attentive listening by fully focusing on your partner's words without interrupting and reflecting back what you have heard demonstrates understanding and promotes empathy. I would say that if you're, doing that, right, then you're creating a healthy space for respecting one another, allowing those needs to be heard and allowing those needs to be met. And then in that sense, I would say that you're probably halfway to fixing it, right? Because you have to understand first what the problem is and understand the needs of in the relationship and that you're communicating about fully, to then be able to come to an agreement and come to a solution. My second point is asking, are you on the same team? Or stating that you are on the same team, right? So oftentimes in arguments, a lot of people want to look at the other person and say these you statements and say you did this or you are this, right? Which is, essentially attacking your spouse and saying you're the problem, I'm not the problem, and you're not taking any responsibility. According to Orchard Mental Health Group, they suggest that using I statements in framing your concern using I statements rather than you statements allows you to approach and to focus on how you feel versus placing the blame. If you're using you statements and you're placing blame, then what's going to happen is the other person's going to want to be defensive. They're going to be like, no, right? And it's going to turn into this threat that the other person has to then defend, and then that goes back and forth. Using an I statement is you're personally taking the responsibility and saying that this is an issue that this is what I'm feeling, right? I'm not placing the blame on you regardless of what the result is, but this is what I'm feeling, right? And how can we then go further into coming to a solution together as a team, right? Remembering that you're on the same team, that you're not here to fight against the other person, but you're here to build up the other person. And there's going to be conflict, but you can't do it in a sense that you're going to be attacking the other person. I would also mention something that worked that I think goes along with this, right? And being on the same team is, for us, the physical act of going on a walk, actually, and then using I statements is putting me and my spouse shoulder to shoulder, right? And so when you think of like a football team or a soccer team, right? When you're going to battle in sports, you're shoulder to shoulder oftentimes, and that is making sure that you're on the same team, right? And so if you're going on a walk and you need to have these conversations, you're using I statements and you're shoulder to shoulder, not face to face, then for me and we just realized that it really brings down a lot of defensiveness. It recognizes and physically puts us on the same team and makes us recognize that. And so then we're able to be like, okay, this is how I feel, or these are the issues that I'm dealing with. And then allows us to set ourselves up to better and more quickly work through those and come to a solution. My last point is intentional check-ins. This is another topic that I see is very important, and it may look different between couples, right? So what you and your spouse or you in a relationship deem as an intentional check-in is going to differ. Focus on the Family talks about being intentional with your conversations in their article, 4 types of communication to strengthen your marriage. And that expressing that and being intentional with opportunities to have healthy conversation will help grow your marriage. And so having those intentional points, those intentional conversations, those intentional check-ins, and setting those almost like a time or a date or like, saying every once a week, right? That's something that me and my spouse typically try and do is we try and have these what we call coffee dates, right? And we have a set list of questions where once a week we talk about those, and it helps us be intentional and listen to one another, to listen to their needs and recognize where they're coming from or what's going on that we may not just observe on the surface. Psychology Today also mentions how prioritizing small moments in conversation and having fun will increase your intimacy as a couple, which is extremely important, right? The more that you're having these intimate and intentional check-ins, the more that your marriage is going to be in alignment, the more that your relationship's going to be in alignment, and the better you're going to have healthy communication. In conclusion, I would say that having healthy communication in marriage is not easy, but it's vital to have a healthy relationship, and something that both parties have to be intentional in working on. It's not only one person can do it here and one person can do it here. It's maybe not 50-50 the entire time, but it is a full-time role on both sides. The National Library of Medicine suggests that couples who have a healthy balance of communication have a healthier and more long-lasting marriage. I believe that the three main points that I talked about, that they support a biblical view of marriage. That is loving, supportive, understanding, and compassionate, just as we're taught with Scripture, and how Christians should carry themselves and act. Some supporting verses, I'm not going to go into all of them, but that help explain this and support this as being biblical truth of marriage. It comes from Ephesians 5, verse 22, 25, 28, 33, 1 Peter 3:7, Hebrews 13:4, Ecclesiastes 4:9-12, and 1 Corinthians 13:4-7. These are just some. There's many more where that comes from, but just some references. So that is the end of my presentation. I just want to thank you and have a good day.